Welcome to Distribution Talk with Jason Bader, the show where we dive into the stories, struggles, and solutions from business owners and thought leaders in the wholesale distribution market. Hey friends, Jason here. In this episode, I had the opportunity to speak with Lincoln Smith, Chief Strategy Officer with HMI Performance Incentives. His company is in the business of designing, managing, and implementing loyalty programs for wholesale and manufacturing organizations. We are all familiar with these programs on the consumer side through our credit cards and other travel loyalty incentives. But where these programs become really interesting is in their application for B2B relationships. I enjoyed learning about the evolution of this industry, and I hope you do too. This episode of Distribution Talk is sponsored by InSequel Distribution Software. InSequel is a fully functional distribution-based software package, and these folks do it very well at a price point many smaller distributors can afford. Another thing I like about this company is they do it all in-house. They take on these applications and build them into the platform using state-of-the-art Microsoft technology. No third-party bolt-ons for them. This is important because when you need technical assistance, they are the single point of contact. If you're ready to step up to a fully loaded, scalable distribution package at an affordable price, look no further than InSequel Distribution Software at www.insequel.com. That's INXSQL.com. All right. Hey, Lincoln, welcome to Distribution Talk. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you very much, Jason. It's my pleasure for being here. I appreciate the invitation.
Well, I think that, some of the things that you and your organization offer are very interesting to my listeners. And so, let's dive right into it. Give me a little history, if you could, just talking about how you got interested in loyalty programs, incentives programs. And, you've been in this a long, long time, as I noticed. So you've probably seen the good, bad, and the ugly. And if you wouldn't mind, give us a little history lesson.
So I started in the incentive and loyalty space with the HMI Performance Incentives back in '96, believe it or not. And originally grew up in California and Ohio. HMI is actually based out of Boston. We were founded in Cambridge, believe it or not, in 1980. So the organization has been around 40 years now. But I came in and started in 1996. And the reason I got introduced to it is Paul Ferreira, who's the founder of HMI Performance Incentives, is actually my uncle. So I had already had, growing up, an admiration and an interest in this really exciting industry of recognizing and motivating people and customers for a job well done. So anyhow, I had been kind of introduced to it for quite a period of time, not knowing that this would be a profession of mine. I was in my senior year of college, and I was a psychology major. And I realized that, geez, I have no interest in pursuing that as a profession, and really wanted to get into the business world. So anyhow, I ended up contacting my uncle and moving out to Boston in 1996. It was going to be a temporary situation for maybe a couple of years to get my feet wet and learn business. And, when you know it, I fell in love with the industry and got my MBA and left the company for a couple of years, and then worked for a consulting company out of Colorado, and then ended up moving back and starting my full-time career at HMI in 2001. Anyhow, a little bit longer intro than you were probably expecting, but it does have a little bit of a story behind it.
Oh, yeah. Most of my listeners understand the family business and the temporary thing, stepping in and say, I'm just going to try this out for a little while, maybe put a little something on my resume, and then all of a sudden the hooks get in you and you just cannot get out. You are in. Oh, yeah. My definitely distributors can definitely relate to that. Most people never came out of school saying, I'm going to be in distribution. Yeah, this is a great career for me. No, it's fascinating. And, really just for the more of an education, for the listeners, can you describe the whole, kind of the evolution of this? Because I know it's changed considerably over the years, how loyalty and points program, and people understand this from a, airline points and things like that, or hotel points and all these different points program. But I think there's a whole lot more to it than that.
Yeah, no, great point, Jason. And the industry has completely changed and become much more sophisticated, much more of a strategic approach. And HMI Performance Incentives is no different with that evolution. And I'll say this, I think a lot of the listeners today, actually, I'll rephrase that. All of the listeners today are familiar with loyalty programs. I think most adult Americans, I think it's like 97% of them, participate in some form of a consumer loyalty program. So we're all very much conditioned as consumers of what these programs offer and what those benefits are, and how they might drive certain buying behaviors. But back in 1980 and over the years, we've evolved to being again much more consultative and much more strategic with what our program rule structures are, what are the goals and objectives, what kind of communications and business rules need to be applied in order for someone to earn some type of benefit. Again, in the old days, it was kind of do this, get that, very simple. Maybe reach $100,000 in purchases, and I'll take you and your spouse on a travel experience or a group incentive travel program.
Mhm.
Whereas today, it's moved into a lot more data analytics, reporting, being able to communicate and engage with your customer in a much more meaningful way, tying in your suppliers or your vendors to help support the program and message. And it's definitely become part of a business strategy opposed to just a reward strategy.
It just dawned on me as you had mentioned, you started out as a psychology major, and that's a tremendous. Even though you chose not to practice, in psychology, I think that this is honestly right up your alley. I mean, it really does dovetail here. I mean, you're really talking about motivation, changing behaviors, and that's, at least to me, perhaps me, the uneducated one about these things, it seems to me that that's really kind of a phenomenal tie-in. And again, maybe your uncle saw that and you just didn't at the time, who knows.
Right. Yeah, no, definitely. It's this industry has a psychology element to it. And what we call or refer to it as really behavioral economics. And, there's been a lot on the psychology of a customer or a consumer. And we're all, behave irrationally in our buying decisions. And a loyalty program and proper framing and messaging can really help influence a desired behavior. And so that psychology background definitely kind of gets pulled into my perspective and how I work with a lot of our distributor clients today.
Gotcha. I was actually thinking about, I think those airline incentives, getting up to certain levels and miles and things like that. I mean, if you step back and really think about that, what a very odd behavioral, state. I mean, I was thinking about a good friend of mine. I remember it was near the end of the year and he wanted to get up to the next status level and literally flew to Boston for a day, walked around for a day, said, I'm going to go walk around, and then flew home
Yeah.
just to get that next bump. And if I really think about it, it's irrational. But if I, stop for a second, I'd probably do it too. That's the thing, that's the weird part about that. So I think, yes, there is a lot of motivational view of any type of loyalty program. One of the things that, you had mentioned early on was the perception here was buy this, get points. And that was really a very basic cause and effect type of relationship there. But today, these are much more sophisticated programs. And I think we also equated these more with B2C types of transactions previously. But now the B2B is very, very prevalent. Could you talk about more some of the sophisticated, what's going on in the industry? It's much more sophisticated.
Most definitely. And I know most of our listeners are in distribution and wholesale. And I would say a good percentage of our portfolio is, in fact, running these B2B incentive programs for wholesalers. A lot of times what we're doing is we're designing programs to help engage and motivate and give their contractor or customer or dealer or installer, whatever the right terminology might be, another reason to provide that discretionary purchase through the sponsoring company. And what levers do we have to help encourage that share of wallet spend being shifted over to one distributor over the next? And we all realize this that are on this podcast, that those customers have typically 4 to 5 alternative choices to make a very similar type of purchase. So these programs can really be designed to drive certain behaviors. And I think this is where your question was getting at, Jason, was that, as an example, it's no longer just do this, get that, but here we are in April of 2020, and the world looks a little bit different here this month than it did just 6 weeks ago now. One of our wholesaler clients has a loyalty and an incentive program targeting their contractors. And one of the behaviors that they really wanted to drive was really adoption of their e-commerce and their omni channels. And so, what it is it allows us to design rewards or incentives. In this case, they would earn double or triple points for those purchases that were going to be driven to their e-commerce site. So a lot of that had to do with adoption of a new technology and then driving a new behavior for them to get comfortable working with that distributor using their e-commerce platform and delivery method. So that's one example.
Yeah, yeah. Again, most of us equate it to product based, that
Right.
we get points for products, but what you just shared with us, and now my mind's, running a little bit here, is that not only, the change of behavior to move over to an e-commerce play, but, gosh, I can start thinking about, well, we have different delivery services, or we have, if you pick up at my place and essentially lower my transactional costs, reward you with X. I mean, so yeah, I can just see that, wow, there's all kinds of different things that we could do here.
Exactly. And I think where you were kind of pulling on that is, yeah, at the end of the day, distributors are looking for opportunities to differentiate themselves, to create a stronger relationship with their customers, and then drive behaviors that are in the interest of both the contractor or the customer and the
Hmm.
wholesaler himself. So, I think you and I were brainstorming the other day, Jason, on, how to
Yeah.
increase, margin enhancement, and
Yeah.
a good loyalty or an incentive program can absolutely help, achieve that. And one of those examples is maybe it is getting that behavior to make more purchases online can help
Hmm.
contribute to that. Another example is setting up a rule structure or criteria that have to do with maybe product bundles, would be another way of encouraging and enhancing the bottom line margin. I would say this is maybe the more popular one that we see in wholesale programs, is really taking a look at your customer profiles. And there's a misnomer of running a loyalty or an incentive program, and everyone feels that the only customer base that matters is your top customers, or that top 20% that's producing
Hmm.
8% of your volume. And I'm not suggesting that that's not an important customer base. They certainly should be treated and communicated and offer benefits. But we find that a lot of margin enhancement and sales growth really can come from that middle 60 audience that oftentimes gets less attention from the wholesaler sales teams, maybe for some marketing. We could really help out with margin enhancement and increasing sales by really designing a program that engages that audience. And they usually have a lot more share of wallet to shift. So if we design the program properly, that could be a huge win, for an organization in any economic environment.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, well, first and foremost, that top 20%, generally speaking, is not high margin. I mean, there's this inverse proportion, greater volume, lesser margin, at least from a percentage standpoint, not margin dollar standpoint, but from a percentage standpoint. But if you look at that middle 60, that group there, that more often than not, the percentages on average are higher. And if we can drive more volume through them, then yes, we're going to see greater gross margin dollar capture through that. So no, I absolutely agree. And I think really targeting those would be a tremendous strategy. And again, with data, here's the thing is, you and I both going through our careers, we've kind of been around this a little while, that now we have so much more access to that, and we can pull those people and we can find those customers that we want to target where there is opportunity. Perhaps, I mean, one of the things I love to look at is, fancy term is gap analysis. I kind of look at it as an opportunity to support just how many product categories is this particular customer participating in. They pay you well, they're a good customer, but maybe they're participating in 5 or less, 6 or less categories, where why couldn't they participate in 10 or greater? And to me, it sounds like this is where some of these incentives can come in again, through a data-driven process, and you all can design something that would push us in that positive direction.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thanks for bringing that up. In all honesty, that's also part of the evolution of the industry, and our approach over the years is absolutely data first, be data driven on it, and that's where we recommend the listeners to really take a look at your current customer profiles and how well do you know them. And Jason, you talked about some of those attributes that are really important to take a look at, and not only it's the sales dollars, but what product categories are they coming in to, what
Mhm.
information do you have to know about their total capacity as a customer, and then be able to identify where that true upside might be for each customer, and then design a program that'll help influence those
Mhm.
desired behaviors. And again, it could be product shift, could be just increased in sales. All of those elements are critical. And I wanted to mention one other thing on that other topic
Yeah.
we had is that when we talk about that top 20 or middle 60, when you do take a look at the
Mhm.
data and you do analysis of your customers, we call that top 20, more of a defensive type of play. Those are your bread and butter. You have strong relationships. You're counting on
Mhm.
them for this year and many years to come. So defensively, you want to have an incentive strategy that really recognizes and rewards them and furthers that relationship. And we call that a defensive opportunity or play there. And then the more offensive, again, is going after that middle 60 or even maybe that bottom 20 if we felt like that was an
Mhm.
important area to focus in on it. And that's where we get really aggressive going after that audience.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, I'm gonna go back to my relationship with loyalty programs, and it's a good 20 plus years ago, and it just seems to me that we certainly did not have that type of sophistication or thought process associated with this, and I think that the folks that we worked with, and this isn't really a knock on them, that it was more about us buying into the program, us buying bundles of points. I mean, let's put
Right.
it that way. And then we had to figure out where we were going to place them and how we were going to put them. And, it was kind of up to us to figure out how that program works so that we could prevent infighting within the organization, the contractor we were targeting. I mean,
Sure.
and so it sounds to me today, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me that you all are really functioning more as an agency approach, more like a marketing agency versus a really what I kind of looked at is like, hey, I'm going to show you this really cool program. Go get them, Tiger. So,
Exactly. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, we have there's all kinds of technologies out there to help manage and provide reward catalogs and make transactions on. But I do encourage any business owner to kind of go through this process of what are those real key goals and business objectives. Who's that right target audience? What type of return are we looking for? And then how are we going to communicate it? How are we going to invest the sales organization? And then ultimately, how are we going to pivot on a continual basis or enhance it on a continued basis? So that is kind of an agency mentality, and we're one of them. There are several really great
yeah.
organizations that are out there, of course, but I do encourage business owners to really kind of think beyond, again, that old school, do this, get that fulfillment oriented type of mentality as it pertains to incentives. And the things we're talking about here today, hopefully it will spark some of that interest.
Yeah, it definitely seems like you all become a lot closer to the client and you really are understanding their businesses a lot better. Whereas I just didn't have that same experience 20 years ago. But, obviously that's the evolution of your business. You all get smarter. We all get smarter. You get kicked in the teeth a couple times. You get a little smarter after that.
Right?
So,
I call that scar tissue. So we have
yeah.
scar tissue. We've been around a while. We have a lot of great blue chip clients that, to be honest, I think as all business owners are, we're humbled by those partnerships that we have with our clients, and we learn as much from them as hopefully they learn from us. That's the other value that we're bringing is kind of this third party. We're not in wholesale, although we work with wholesalers or distributors every single day. Like you, Jason, we stay on top of, and participate in NAW and NAED and Hardy and, a lot of these other organizations to make sure that we really understand the trends, the suppliers, the community, and the overarching challenges that are going on. And by doing so, we're able to be a good advisor or a good sounding board.
Speaking of that, and it's a great segue there, actually. There was, a number of months ago, a couple of months ago, you posted an article. You had attended the NAW conference back in DC, and something I used to attend years ago. And you took away some insights. And I read the article over and I thought, wow, these are some pretty nice job. I was like, wow, this is pretty good. So I'd love to, if we could take a few minutes to just talk about some of the things that you took away from that meeting. And I guess for our listeners, NAW is the National Association of Wholesalers. It's the large lobbying entity, essentially, of the wholesale community. But yeah, some of the things that you talked about here. I mean, I think one of the more interesting things that I picked up, though, was looking at the service. Right now, we have the commoditization of availability and delivery, but services, right now, they're bundled in, and you're suggesting we got to pull them out and really shine on service as a separate value proposition. So please, if you wouldn't mind.
I'd love to take credit for that idea. And I'm sure a lot of the listeners have kind of heard the importance of that. I was kind of inspired by Ian Heller, who was one of the keynote speakers for that particular event. But we did do a lot of breakouts, and I've talked to a lot of other wholesalers. And again, we all realize that we are all trying to differentiate ourselves. We're trying to compete against any big marketplace, i.e., Amazon Business or the commoditization of our products. And I think what we find is that most of the wholesalers that we work with have a tremendous amount of added value services that they provide their customer base, but a lot of times they haven't done a really good job of communicating those services. And one of the observations that came really kind of clear to me was that wholesalers do need to take stock and inventory of those services and that value that they do provide their existing customers, and make sure that they are on their website, and inevitably, if they have a loyalty or an incentive program, make sure that those are integrated as part of the communication of why to do business with you, and maybe even reward them for taking advantage of those services in some fashion. Again, I think that a lot of wholesalers discount that value, and I think that they could do a better job of highlighting it in a myriad of different ways.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that you touched on, actually, maybe it was in the conclusion, was adding a services tab to a website. Most people have products, of course, and who we are, et cetera, but services, and really highlighting those services. And I thought that was, again, this, 2x4 to the back of the head moment. It's like, oh, missed that one.
Exactly. We all do it, but we don't do a good job of putting it in print, do we?
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I think you're absolutely right. And maybe it's also that the wholesaler or distributor needs to step back and actually think about all the things they do.
Mm.
This is an exercise I do like to talk about a lot when I teach. Is I talk about all the really great things that distributors do and why they deserve their place in the supply chain, but also inventory, really taking a good inventory of you as a company. What are those services that you do, and are any of them key differentiators?
Absolutely, and I like to use. I like the way that you kind of framed the word inventory. That's kind of
Mhm.
appropriate in a couple of different ways there, but absolutely, yeah. And I think that everyone should inventory those added value services that are just bundled as part of your margin, or maybe there are services that are above and beyond that you can make a profit off of. But really, kind of prioritizing and highlighting those for your customer base is a great thing and exercise to do. And
Mhm.
how it pertains to an incentive program or a loyalty program or a promotion, these are just communication and engagement tactics to deliver that message on a more consistent or maybe a more meaningful way. So those services that we've highlighted become integrated in the messaging that we do to your customer base to keep instilling why buy from you opposed to anyone that might be down the street.
One just dawned on me, actually. I work with a lot of wholesalers that have showrooms,
Mm.
and especially in the it could be electrical, from lighting showrooms to plumbing showrooms and things. And one of the major frustrations in those verticals is where somebody will come into your showroom and see all the really pretty, and work with one of your design people, and get all the fixtures, and get to see, touch, and feel them, and then order them online with somebody else. That is a huge frustration, and it seems to me that you could use an incentive play with that to retain that client. Some of the people that I've been speaking with, they've talked about having actually design fee associated at this point, and the design fee is waived if you buy from us. But I think there's another way to approach that.
Yeah, no, I think those are great tactics too. I'm starting to see more of those types of strategies as well, where, hey, we want to be a good supplier, we want to be a good designer, we want to be a good wholesaler or distributor for you. But when we start to hold your hand and design these things, then of course we're looking for
Yeah.
some type of a commitment there. As it pertains to a loyalty or an incentive program, there are things that could be punitive or could be rewarding, different levers that you could use, in those instances. But if you end up doing a consultation with, a showroom designer, as an example, you may encourage that behavior. And by doing so, each consultation you earn X points in value. And
Sure.
why would I do that? Well, one of the reasons I might do that is the data might show that if I get the contractor and the homeowner in the showroom together with my designer, the probability of that sale goes up by X, or
Yeah.
the value of that transaction is worth Y. And
Hmm.
so now what we're focused in on is a behavior rather than a transaction. So the behavior is bringing in someone into a showroom and having a scheduled design meeting. And that has a value that I'm willing to incent and reward on. So again, just an example, different business models, but just wanted to kind of highlight that as an example of things that we see.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's really starting to, kind of, I'm starting to get squirrel cage running here a little bit, and realizing that, there are so many different things that, so many, I guess, so many challenges that I hear that we could look at it from an incentive play, and we could look at it another way to tackle this problem. I'm a huge believer that have many arrows in the quiver. You've got a lot of different tactics to attack any challenge that we're up against. And this is really just one of them. And it just needs to be one that we're considering at all times. So no, I appreciate this. Now this has been a good education for me for sure on this kind of stuff. So
Definitely. And we oftentimes say, Jason, it's not the incentive is why people buy from you. It's the cherry on top of the cheesecake. But the incentive, if designed properly, puts a spotlight on the value that you bring. And we encourage the behaviors that are productive for the contractor and for you. So this is not a bait and switch, or I'm trying to buy someone's business in any fashion. These
mhm.
are really strategic, business driven initiatives, and a properly structured promotion or incentive or loyalty program can really help highlight your business and be thought of. You can be thought of in a much different light than your competition. So again, it's no tricks. This is really kind of a business oriented approach to things.
Well, and I think it becomes much more attractive, or I guess much more accepted, because we are now moving from a sales driven only organizations. Again, when I started out, and it was sales and marketing was this, little thing that we did. We didn't even know what it was. We tacked it onto the title just because it sounded good. It was nice and long, and absolutely had to go together. But now, as these distributors become much more sophisticated on the marketing side, and they're really understanding the science of marketing, that the programs that you're talking about now become much more relevant, and you can see how they fit an overall strategy. And I think as companies like yours become much more agency like, if we can go back to that, much more understanding of becoming real marketing agencies,
Mhm.
then it now becomes a much more interesting for a smaller business owner. And actually, on that thought, is there a certain size organization that this really is better for? I mean, do you really need a certain critical mass in order for an incentive program to work?
No, is the short answer, I suppose. We work with organizations that might be 5 or 10 million in annual revenue with a couple of different locations, and then we work with $500 million large national wholesalers. So we do run the gamut. What we do is we treat obviously each opportunity exactly the same. The scale is a little bit different, but I think your point, Jason, is that you don't have to be a large entity with a lot of volume to effectively run an incentive program or promotion or loyalty program. I wanted to state one other thing kind of on that topic, Jason, is that wholesale and distribution is in a really good spot to run these programs. And the reason I say that, and the reason our portfolio is so flush, with distribution is that you can design a program that is self-liquidating. And what I mean by that, we could design, or you could design a program that has kind of a quid pro quo, and you can maybe take incremental gross margin dollars to help support or fund a program. That's
Hmm.
one lever. But the other reason that it's so nice to be in distribution is that you have vendors and suppliers that are oftentimes eager, I use that word again, eager for wholesalers to be a little bit more strategic with how you might highlight those brands or those key vendors. So co-op utilization can be used to help support these in some fashion if designed properly. And then we oftentimes see additional marketing development funds also being raised. And again, if you're data driven and you have a real clear objective, and we go to a wholesaler, not a wholesaler, but your vendors, oftentimes they will come up with additional support to help finance these types of initiatives. And I'm not speaking out of school here at all. I have some wholesalers that I've worked with where they've had over 100% of their total spend covered, and then more novices or first time users, maybe it's 5, 10, 20% of the overall investment is being offset by their vendors. So it doesn't matter your size, to get back to your question,
Yeah.
but we or you can look at how to fund these regardless of your size in a lot of different ways.
Fantastic. That's a good message, because I think, again, we always get these perceptions, that only the big can advertise, only the big can do e-commerce, for example. And now with technology, and only the big can video conference. No, not anymore. We're all pretty good at that now. And so I think that that's one of the myths that you have to dispel, is that only the large entities can put together incentive programs like this. And as you said, that's clearly not the case. There's lots of ways to go about this. And it sounds to me like you all are very adept at coaching through that process.
Exactly. And one of the things on the smaller end, what we found is we call them promotions. So it could be a sweepstakes contest, games of chance. But again, those could be fixed budget initiatives that'll really kind of create a lot of buzz and a lot of excitement, shift a lot of buying attention for a certain period of time. So again, not every strategy has to be, a 5-year ongoing commitment. These things could be looked at a lesser budget and a lesser time frame, and they can be really effective for you. So never discount those. And again, those can be designed and deliver some really great results.
Well, Lincoln, I truly appreciate this conversation. We've been going at it for a little while here, and I think we got to come to a close. But how can people come find you? Because I think they do need to learn more about this.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's been fun. I feel like we were just scratching the surface. I might have to
I
come back again,
know.
Jason.
Happens every time, my friend.
You can always find HMI Performance Incentives at hmiaward.com, and then LinkedIn. Happy to have a conversation, and that's what it is. It's be happy to be a sounding board for any wholesaler or manufacturer that just wants to have another perspective. Happy to give it.
Great. All right. We'll definitely link all that information in the show notes. And, Lincoln, it's been a pleasure, man. As you said, we only scratched the surface, but really enjoyed the conversation today.
Certainly. Yeah. No, Jason, you're an absolute pro. I've been following you for many years, and I'm just honored that you invited me to have this conversation today. So I look forward to many more.
All right. Well, you take care. Thanks again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for listening. If you liked what you heard, consider hitting that subscribe button. Links to sponsors, products, and services mentioned during this episode can be found in the show description area on your podcast application or at www.distributiontalk.com. Distribution Talk is edited and mixed by Andrea Klunder and Edwin Ruiz at the Creative Imposter Studios. This episode was brought to you by my company, The Distribution Team. We are a consulting services firm dedicated to helping wholesale distribution clients remove barriers to profitability, generate wealth, and achieve personal goals. To learn more about how we can help your company succeed, check us out at www.thedistributionteam.com.